Hello everyone, I'm Beck and this is Anna.
Hello everyone.
Now you've got a voice sample for each of us. You can know who's talking through the presentation. As our introduction states, we're both speech pathologists with a passion for working with individuals on the autism spectrum who use AAC. We are also both very interested in promoting the power of communication using different communication functions, supporting people who use AAC to expand on their use.
To begin today, we acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay respects to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting or attending our presentation from other areas of South Australia and Australia present here.
Our learning outcomes for the presentation today are for the participants to build their understanding of communication functions, as well as identify strategies to support an individual's use of communication functions. Augmentative and alternative communication involves a range of systems and strategies that enhance and/or replace spoken communication. For example, think of a cup that already has some liquid or some drink in it. There's already something in there, but there's not quite enough. This person may benefit from something else being added to their cup, something augmentative, something to enhance their communication. Now think of a cup that does not have any liquid in it. This person may benefit from their cup being filled up with something else, something alternative. Think of these cups as someone's communication ability. Sometimes people benefit from help, or something being added to their cup. Unaided AAC requires no additional equipment, for example, gestures, pointing, facial expressions and signing, whereas aided AAC involves additional equipment, and this can range from low-tech, so paper-based options, through to communication board, books, photos, symbols, and also speech-generating devices.
So for many people with autism, verbal communication might not be easy, but it certainly doesn't mean they haven't got anything to say. And so we look at AAC being the key to their communication success. We have provided here for you a description of what autism spectrum disorder is. So it is characterised by impairments in social communication and social interaction, together with restricted repetitive patterns of behaviour, interests or activities. We need to consider this when we are planning for AAC. Individuals with autism can have challenges with really foundational skills to communication, which is things like turn-taking, joint attention, cause and effect, imitation. So we do really need to be aware of that when we are planning our intervention. In our intervention, we must focus on the social aspects of communication, so our pragmatics and the meaning of the message, rather than focusing heavily on the sentence structure or their grammar. We want to develop functional communication that positively impacts their daily lives.
We just want to talk a little bit now around AAC and autism specifically. So some of the factors that we want to make sure that everyone's considering when supporting an individual with autism who uses AAC to communicate is, in particular, echolalia. Individuals may present with echolalia, which is the rote repetition of words, phrases or sentences without necessarily understanding the meaning of them. This might be things heard as part of routines, in conversations, in TV shows or in books. There are also different types of echolalia, as many of you probably know, and they can be used very differently. Also to consider is an individual's fine and their gross motor skills. Consider their impact on this on their ability to access the AAC system. This is especially important for individuals on the spectrum because sometimes these aren't overtly obvious. Also to consider are sensory preferences. These can have a really big impact on an individual's ability to access the AAC system. We do recommend that you liaise with an occupational therapist to identify aspects of their individual sensory profile and how this may impact upon their ability to access the AAC system. Another big factor is regulation for communication. We often hear they're not interested or they can't sit, they can't attend. We know that for a lot of individuals on the spectrum, this regulation is really, really tricky. So we also recommend collaborating with an occupational therapist, because if an individual is having troubles with communication, it may be that they're not actually in the right regulated state to be engaging in that. Another area to consider is, of course, generalisation, the transfer of a skill learned in one environment to another. We know this can be especially challenging for individuals on the autism spectrum, but there are a lot of strategies that we can put in place in order to support generalisation, most specifically consistency of strategies and implementation. Communicative means, in other words, ways to communicate, relate to the multiple methods of communication that we use throughout our daily lives. These can include non-verbal communication means, such as non-verbal, things like gesture, physical manipulation, facial expressions, showing, giving, emotional outbursts, and even inclusive of self-injury. There's also verbal means of communication, including vocalization. So even if somebody isn't necessarily using a word or a sentence and they are just making sounds of varying pitches, then this does still count as communication, as well as the imitation, single words, phrases, and sentences. Communicative functions, our reasons to communicate. Communication is an exchange of information between individuals that happens every day. There are countless reasons to communicate, and every person has the right to communicate. Communication functions are the many different reasons why someone might communicate. It's the purpose of their communication. All communication has a purpose. This could include, but isn't limited to, telling a story, asking for help, ordering a donut, asking a question, giving a compliment, commenting on the weather, complaining about something, or requesting a hug. It goes beyond requesting. Communication is often stalled when the focus is purely on requesting and making choices. These are often the quickest skills for individuals who use AAC to learn because it's concrete and it meets their immediate need. This is also the case for individuals on the autism spectrum who communicate using speech to make requests and choices. For all of these individuals, it is important to remember that there is more to communication than just requesting and making choices. And therefore, we should not stop supporting them to learn new communication functions that will further support their ability to interact with others and build social relationships. The dangers of not focusing on supporting development of a range of communication functions can include setting low expectations, giving them a ceiling for their skill development and not providing opportunities to learn new skills. Explicit teaching, repetitive requesting, for example, taking an object away just so they have to request for it again. And 3, little to no development of conversation skills, which are important for building relationships with others.
What we would like for you to do is consider how the people you currently support might communicate different communication functions already, and consider the different means they might be using. So when we are interpreting, we need to remember that we're basically making an informed guess about what this person might be saying. There's a lot of things that they could be trying to say. We've provided 3 examples here. For example, someone bangs their hand on the table when someone stands in front of the smartboard. Their way of communicating is using body movement and gesture. Their reason for communicating is to protest, to complain, versus someone who points to the sky and says plane and smiles. There's the way that they're communicating is using gesture, so point, facial expression and speech. Their reason for communicating could be to comment, to tell a story, such as maybe they went on a plane recently, or to ask a question like, where's it going? And finally, someone takes your hand and leads you to a preferred activity and gives you part of it to hold. So their way of communicating is physical manipulation, so leading you and giving you an item. Their reason for communicating is social interaction, to comment. As you can see, there's lots of reasons for communicating embedded in these examples, and they're all quite simple ones. When we get good at doing our interpreting or our informed guessing, it's an important skill to know what to then model to someone. We use evidence-based modelling, which is most effective when used with prompting and reinforcement. So it's a way of teaching, and you've been doing this your whole life to teach others how to do something such as writing, cooking, reading, opening a container, maybe teaching someone how to shave. You do that by showing someone how to do the skill. And so that's what we use with AAC. You might have heard of modelling by some other titles, such as aided language stimulation, aided language input, language modelling, AAC modelling. We're assuming that most people are familiar with language modelling in AAC here today. So when we think about modelling, we are thinking about how the input impacts the output. Typically, for example, we speak to young babies and bombard them with spoken language long before we expect them to use their first words. And then a person who uses spoken language then will do so by independently selecting the words they want to use from the vast array of words they hear us use every day. So learning to use AAC is no different. We cannot expect a person to spontaneously start using their AAC system to communicate unless we have built a learning environment where they are immersed in the use of their communication system. That is, a person who uses AAC will only do so independently, selecting the words they wish to use from the vocabulary that other people have chosen to model and make available to them. We need to remember that we are interpreting the ways and the reasons for communication. So as supportive communication partners, we need to interpret the way that they are communicating to us, so using non-verbal methods or verbal, and think about what the function of that communication might be. So is it to comment, to reject, to communicate something is wrong? And this then tells us what to model on their AAC system. Let's take the examples that we provided before and identify what we could model. A strategy to support modelling from the individual's perspective is using an introductory statement to cue you, to remind you to do this. So you could use, I think you're saying, or I think you're telling me. So it's extremely important that we model from their perspective because it is their voice, it's not ours. They need to understand the power of their own voice. Modelling from their perspective teaches them how they can use their AAC to express themselves. It shows them that you're listening and is more powerful because it's meaningful to them. So, for example, someone bangs their hand on the table when someone stands in front of the smartboard. So we could model things like, stop, I don't like it, go away. If someone points to the sky and says plane and smiles, we could model, I think you're saying, I see a plane. Or I think you're saying, where plane go? Or someone takes your hand and leads you to a preferred activity and gives you part of it. We could model, I think you're saying, look, or play with me, come see, or like. So we focus the modelling on the meaning of the message rather than grammar or sentence structure. We recommend you consult with your speech pathologist regarding what level to model at. So is it single words, short phrases, or sentence level? As a general rule, we should be modelling at 1 to 2 words above their current expressive output, whether verbally or with their AAC. So when modelling for different communication functions, we need to think about the vocabulary that we are modelling. So there's different kinds of vocabulary, so core words versus fringe vocabulary. So core words are a limited set of highly useful words. They're important, they're functional, and they're powerful and equate to approximately 85% of what we communicate. The vocabulary is primarily made up of pronouns, verbs, descriptors, and prepositions, and it's vocab that we can apply across a range of settings. By modelling core words, we're exposing the person to a flexible vocabulary that they can use for different purposes. Fringe vocab are words that are used less frequently, such as nouns, that cannot be used for a wide range of purposes. This does include individual-specific vocab, which is specific to the person and their interests. For example, their favourite brand of cereal, particular characters they like from TV shows or games, their hometown, people in their lives. So fringe vocab means more when it's paired with a core word. So for example, home versus go home, like home. So including those core words are going to give you more meaning.
Communicative competence describes 4 areas of skill development for an individual. These skill areas can apply to people who communicate verbally, non-verbally, and or with AAC. In addition to these 4 areas of communicative competence, there's also emotional competence, which was suggested by Blackstone and Wilkins in 2009 as an important communication area for individuals to develop. It relates to the development of an emotional vocabulary and utilising that lexicon to relay feelings, beliefs, and thoughts. Most commonly, individuals who use AAC to communicate work on their skills in the linguistic area. For example, sentence structure, learning more words, vocabulary. However, this often neglects the other areas that are essential for someone to be able to communicate in a variety of settings with a variety of people. For example, problem-solving skills when the volume isn't working on their device, asking for help to add or to find a word, knowing when to use their AAC to talk or to wait their turn in a social conversation, understanding that they need to transport their AAC system with them between environments, or knowing when they are in a noisy environment they might need to turn up the volume on their AAC device, or that they may need to turn the device around to show someone what they're saying on their AAC system. So where do communication functions fit into communicative competence? Consider communication functions in the area of social and linguistic competence. We know that we need to focus on the development of social competence to achieve overall communication competence. Consider how will this individual achieve social competence if they are not able to use a range of communication functions. For example, can they participate in a conversation using their skills of requesting and choice making? Which communication functions would support them to be able to participate in the conversation? For example, telling a story or making a comment. This is an important consideration as social communication and interaction skills are a known area of difficulty for individuals on the autism spectrum. Evidence-based intervention for individuals on the autism spectrum should include a focus on the development of social interaction and communication skills. For individuals who use AAC, this is facilitated by the development of different communication functions. How can we support the development of communication functions? We're glad you asked. We can provide opportunities for activities with the individual for them to practice using different communication functions, as well as opportunities for you to model how to use different functions. For example, during show and tell, they could practice and you could practice modelling how to give information, how to give an opinion. Ordering food or drink, asking a question, do you have Coca-Cola? Do you have tea? Making that request, I want a flat white skinny milk latte with 1 sugar. During meal times, commenting on your food, this is yum, this is sticky, I don't like this. Directing, open, get more, put that away. Asking a question, what is that? What do you like eating? Responding to questions, I have pasta, I like eating chocolate. Consider modelling different communication functions as soon as you start supporting someone who uses AAC. We know that focusing on requesting and choice making is really powerful and it's really functional, and you do get success quite early on. However, we've got to remember that if we don't start modelling different communication functions from the start, it can be really tricky to add in later. Remember that even if it appears that they have no interest in communicating for a different range of functions, that does not mean that they actually don't have an interest. They just might not know how to do it. We have to show them through modelling on their AAC system. Setting goals for communication functions so that everyone is aware of the goal and makes time to create the opportunities to model different communication functions and for our guys to be practicing. This can facilitate the individual to learn how to express a range of different functions with different communication partners as well. This supports the generalisation that we were talking about earlier. We can also use a strategy such as activity-based modelling to consider and plan working on communication functions in different activities and contexts.
Activity-based modelling is a really great strategy that helps for planning for certain activities, especially in a dynamic environment such as a classroom. This can take the pressure off by identifying ahead of time what you're going to model in the activity. And so we have some examples for you today. We do need to remember to model from the perspective of the individual who uses AAC, what they might want to say, using "I think you're saying" to help cue us in. So an example is painting, and there's a range of communication functions you can work on in painting, such as describing, requesting, rejecting, giving an opinion, verbs and nouns. For example, if you wanted to work on opinions, you might model things like, "I think you're saying, I like it, beautiful, pretty, ugly." If you were focusing on describing, then you might focus your modelling on colours, shapes and patterns. Similar to shared reading, again, we can work on a range of communication functions. For example, rejecting, so stop, finished, not. Verbs, so open, turn, hide. You can model describing particular actions that are happening in the book. So when you're planning your activity-based modelling, thinking about what book you're going to read is really helpful to plan out exactly what you're going to model so you know what pathways to follow and so that you can feel more confident to model different functions.
Another activity-based modelling could be during a cooking activity, again, modelling some of those different communication functions. Consider Anna's earlier point regarding the level that you would model at. So depending on that person's current expressive output, you are modelling just above their level. So we could turn an activity-based modelling activity such as cooking into a more conversational, phrase-based interaction that still focuses on the different communication functions, if that's at the point that person is at. Our last example is modelling during a movement activity, such as an obstacle course. You can consider planning modelling for any activity throughout the daily routine, no matter the environment. You could also use this as an evaluation tool to look at the communication functions that you are currently modelling and to make a plan to model some new functions. One of the best ways to support the development of communication functions is to continually collaborate as a team. Work with the whole team around the person, the occupational therapist, the speech pathologist, the family, the behaviour practitioner, the physiotherapist. For example, collaborating with the OT to support with strategies for regulation and sensory processing to facilitate engagement. Identifying functional, meaningful goals together, considering their communicative competence. Are we giving them enough of an opportunity to learn new communication functions? Or are we unknowingly limiting them to requesting? To support generalisation of skills across environments and communication partners. To implement strategies and to monitor progress. Remember to work as a team to help the person as you're all there to support them to achieve their goals.
Here are our references for today, should you wish to go do some additional reading and research. We would like to thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at teamaac@autismsa.org.au. If you would like to explore AAC options for someone you know or support, please don't hesitate to contact us for an AAC assessment and trials, block therapy and communication partner group training. Thank you very much.